Hi, it's Esty, live with Orlando Live for the 2013 Florida Film Festival. And you've probably heard a lot about digital, this digital age. The world is going digital, but don't really understand the difference between film and digital. Well, let's go check out a special forum just for you to explain everything that's coming in the future on digital.
Well, I can't tell you how happy I am to be with you all at Enzion and with these guys, because I could talk to these guys for days and we would feel like we didn't get anywhere in terms of trying to extrapolate what's going to happen in the near future and even in the distant future. But we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And we are conversational, so rather than a formal forum, we'll have a conversation and we want to include you. So anytime you want to say anything, just put your hand up and we'll make sure you get a microphone and join the conversation. That said, Bob Allen is an old friend and with new ideas continually. And I just can't tell you how happy I am to get to talk to him in front of you all today. And Bob, we'll go through everybody, but just say something about yourself. What's your story? What would you say about yourself?
I like a lot of people, I think. I was kind of a musician that couldn't make a living, so I had to find something to do. So I was lucky. I came out of college at a time when the Walt Disney Company was going through what I would argue was its second renaissance, perhaps. And so I had a great 26-year period working for a great company that taught me a lot about storytelling and a lot about what you ought to do to fill vacuums in the market, and how to work real hard and not whine. And so that's really what I've done, is pretty much taken those gifts that I was given by other people and tried to continue to go down the road and invent new things.
Thanks, Bob. Evan, I've only known for a couple months, but we've had some amazing conversations already. And Evan is with Snap, which is coming up, so I hope you say something about that. Go ahead and say something. Tell your story, would you?
Oh, this thing is live. Well, I don't know. Story is constantly evolving. I don't really have a specific area of expertise. I kind of bounce around here and there simply because I'm bored, or maybe I just lack the ability to really specialize in anything. At any rate, with marketing and Snap Orlando, we do photography and digital media. We have a yearly festival that we put on. Hopefully you guys will attend that as well. It's a fantastic event. It's coming up at the first week of May. Aside from that, my interests range from, and experience ranges from architecture and biofuels and chemical engineering to marketing and any sort of project I manage to get my hands on that is of interest, at least to me. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks
very much, Evan. Andre Thomas, I've known for a few years now, to my benefit, with Electronic Arts, and he's on the Enzion Advisory Board. And we've talked to each other in terms of partnerships with Full Sail University as well. So it's my pleasure to welcome you here, Andre, and ask you to tell just a little bit about your story.
Well, thanks, Chip. Pleasure to be here. About me, I'm not a musician. About 35 years ago, I got hands on a computer and it stuck with me. Even though my father wanted me to become a tool maker, which I became, because he didn't think computers are going to stick around, right? This is just a fad, it's going to go away. Little did he know that 35 years later, I make a fairly decent living doing digital images. Worked in movies, feature films, commercials, and now interactive games, interactive entertainment. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, thank you very much for being here. I remember a song years ago that said, I'll be watching you. And we'll be watching you, everything you do, every breath you take, every move you make. And that's happening now. And so, you know, the Minority Report, I think you all probably remember that film, that's happening. And that really has a lot to do with our digital future and how that affects storytelling, how it affects Enzion, and how it affects filmmaking, film distribution, business models to create film. So we're going to try to stay within that theme, but we probably won't, knowing these guys will probably get all over the place in terms of what's really going on the planet. An area of research that I do is psychographic segmentation, and that really has to do with We'll Be Watching You. And also another area of research is audio stereoscopic 3D user interface. What that means is the new types of standards that are being set for 3D where you don't need glasses and how you interface with it goes way beyond Kinect. So my background, my recent background is in those areas, and I'll be throwing a few ideas in terms of how we're going to interact with our films and with our games. And that said, I wanted to go ahead and ask a first question. In terms of independent filmmaking, what do you think, Bob, is going to be the most important thing that happens over the next year or two in terms of people's ability to make independent films and view independent films?
Well, if I really knew, I'd go make a bunch of independent films and make a whole bunch of money and stuff. But I think we look at it this way, that if you have to take a macro view first. The digitization of content, not just films, but everything. We were saying at breakfast, if you want to know where things are heading, look at the music business, or the thing formerly known as the music business, which has now created this phenomenally, on one hand, phenomenally effervescent creative effort. I mean, there's more music being made by more people than ever before in every genre you can imagine. And everybody can get to it. What it lacks right now is a business model that sustains that, because it's all been disrupted. All content's going to go down that road, you know. So we're very, very close to a time when, you know, pay me a ticket and you can see my movie may or may not be viable. So we have to think through what the business model is. That aside, though, I mean, I think when we talk about digital media, you know, I would say we're either referring to numbers or fingers. That's what the word digit means. And that's not what's interesting. What's interesting is that tool set has democratized the ability to tell stories in ways that people didn't have access to before. You know, 20 years ago, if you wanted to tell a certain type of story, you needed a certain budget, and a certain level of craftsmanship, and a certain level of technology, and it was very limited. There were lots of barriers to entry. Not so much now. We were yakking at breakfast. I have a 16-year-old daughter. Her standard MO, if she has a school project, is she makes a film. You know, she gets her computer out, knocks a movie together, and turns it in. And nobody taught her to do that. I didn't sit down with her and say, here's how you edit, here's how you shoot, here's how you light. Neither did they do that at school. That's her language. So I think we're about to see this incredible blossoming because of the access to tools, primarily, and this notion that the barriers to entry, if you really want to make a movie, you can make one. None of that, you can go put it out where an audience can get it. Now, if you do that, that doesn't mean you're going to have a successful film, because you still have to find that audience, and you still have to match that audience up with your movie. And I think that's where I love to hear you guys talk about that too, because just because you can make it and get it out there still doesn't mean anyone will ever see it or that you'll ever make a nickel on it. And I think that's where we have to wrestle with it. But the barriers are down. If you want to make the picture, now you can, because you can shoot it with one of these.
Yeah. Or with your Google Glasses, which will be out in it, certainly within a year. Evan, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tend to agree with Bob wholeheartedly. In terms of what's going to affect, filmmaking in the future, it will be access to tools. The interesting part about it to me is also predicting the success of those films, and basically the lack thereof, marketing and branding, and trying to understand what it is that drives, consumer content. And I think viral is the appropriate word, because there is no predictive model. So I think at breakfast we were talking about, the ability to create multi-threaded films, based on the ability to read what your audience, your consumer, is, how they're feeling, how they're interacting, how they're engaging with the content. And do believe that that's in the very near future, as we said, within the next couple of years in a test bed phase, and then, the next 5 to 10 years, you could see the possibility of that occurring, whether it be based first in, ads, advertising on the street, billboards, posters, bus stops, subway, whatnot, and then how that will, come to interact with the audience in a movie theater. You have a static audience that's sitting there where you can obtain their heart rate, their core temperature, what happens when they look in different areas, iris, recognition, body movement, and say, okay, well, this is how people are reacting in this market. So no longer is it a broad demographic that you're trying to reach. You can create films that are specific to the people are going to attend. I'd love to see where that goes and also continue that conversation.
Well, Andre, certainly games bring in about as much money as movies do. And I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot more interactivity like games have in film. Do you want to just kind of sketch out where you think things are going in that regard?
Sure. I think the question personally should be rephrased, not where's filmmaking going, but how do we want to tell stories in the future? That should be the question. Because the tools are there. There'll be better tools next year and the year after. There'll be new technology. It's how do we want to tell the stories? How do we want to engage with the people? And then maybe out of that comes a business model, maybe not. 3,000 years ago when we had cave paintings, I don't know if somebody was thinking about how do I make money or how do I get food for this painting on the wall, rather than I want to leave a legacy behind, I want to tell a story, and that's the medium I use, and I'm going to craft it, and the audience will perhaps find itself, and then we evolve. I like to think there's a higher purpose there rather than just how do we make the most money. I mean, it's important, of course, but it's part of an art storytelling, and I like to put the story first, and then what's available, what's the best way to tell that story? How can we do this?
That's great. It brings us really back to the philosophical center of the conversation and probably where we need to go with it, because maybe the business models are changing so fast that maybe access to community or access to a particular segment that will listen to your story and enjoy and appreciate your story is something that we ought to talk about right now. Because of big data and because of profiling, we potentially have access to a community that's not geographically based or demographically based. We have access to a community, a global community that may share the same interests and the same needs, the same archetypes, the same desires. So, Bob, you want to talk about that, or did you want to go back? I thought you were going to maybe respond to what Andre was talking about.
Oh no, I just think if you really looked in the caves, you'd find the bones of William Morris's ancestors. I think they were agents then too, but. Here's the deal. I think there's always been a human tendency to strike a bargain. Say, hey, what story could I tell you that would cause you to give me some of your attention? And that's really the value exchange here. It's we've just money is just a thing that represents value. That's all it is. And so it's that same value proposition. And there's some things going on that both rely on that and have also changed it. I think one of them is games, mobile, and social media are the new human being operating system. That's the way humans run now. And they've simply become internalized, and so that's the framework we're going to look at stories through. Do they fit that model? And that's an interesting test, and we'll have to see. And you don't have to have a console or be online to play a game. A game is a mental model as much as it is anything else. And we can get into all kinds of discussions about what is a game and why does that work. The singularitists, if I can coin a word, will tell you that by 2040, the web exceeds human processing power in terms of its ability to make decisions quickly. I don't know, and we can debate that too, and there are two sides of that, but it is definite, I think, that it's going to continue to get more and more complex. So what's that mean? Well, among other things, we talk about big data. Big data, I would argue, is already passé. It's big meaning is what's the next thing. Because data's become commodified too. There's plenty of it out there. What's it mean? And that's what humans look for. We want to know, we're constantly driven by this psychological thing called the cognitive imperative. We're animals that go through our life trying to figure stuff out. And we do that with stories. And so the extent to which data or tools or anything else enables us to do that is going to be, I think, where the new models come from. And you know, the other thing y'all should have been at breakfast. We're going to keep talking about breakfast. It was a lot of fun. But next time we should just have a meeting over there. I think what you're going to see is just as recording didn't end the live theater, and just as television didn't end radio, and just as the movie didn't end television, I don't think the holodeck will end the movies. And we like all these form factors. We embrace all these form factors. In fact, I think there's this demand underneath. What excites me about it is that all this digital stuff is just a way to say, yeah, what else you got? What other kinds of stories can you tell me? That's great. I want to taste them all. That seems to be where human beings go. And so I kind of think you're right. It isn't about the tools ultimately. In fact, the better the tools get, the more transparent they'll be. You know, nobody at Walt Disney Imagineering, you know, we used to work really hard to say nobody leaves the show whistling the special effects. You know, you don't come out of Pirates of the Caribbean and say, "Wow, did you see the way they did those clouds?" You come out saying, "That was great. Let's do that again." You know, and don't let the tools get in the way. I think what we're going to see is as tools get better, they get less important, and what we are going to see is new and better and quicker and more effective and more engaging form factors to tell stories.
Any response? Any continuation to this?
Totally agree. I mean, ultimately it's about how do we engage with these stories? How do we engage with each other? And what are the stories that should be told, should be heard, should be listened to, and which are the ones that, you know, nobody necessarily cares about, right? And how do we tell these stories, and how do we interact with those stories? And can we take some of those stories to kind of go back to the filmmaking premise and change them? Can we take an existing story and influence how the story unfolds? In a fictional setting, for example, I can see the future, and experiments have been done. One film where the audience actually interacts with the movie during the movie. So that's the future I can see. Maybe not in 1 to 2 years, but 10 to 15 years, where you'll be interacting with my fictional character that you'll be seeing in a real-world environment and shaping that story of that character, yet it's my character, for example. I think that's feasible within the next 10 to 15 years.
And you think games will certainly go in that direction, don't you?
What are games? I mean, so first I think we have to define what is a game. Right now we have electronic forms of games. Games have been played for thousands of years. Games are being used every day to educate, to entertain, via console, via video, via TV, or via boards or cards, or just mental games. And games have been around. It's just another form of gaming has emerged in the last 25 years, electronic form of gaming. Where will that go? Well, again, right now it's about the medium, but it's becoming more and more about the stories. We're calling it interactive entertainment more and more, rather than it's a game. There's lots of different forms of games out there.
So do you think that young people will grow up like they are now, creating film and creating visual presentations and sound presentations? You think that they'll just grow up naturally creating game type of presentations on their own? Will they have access to that kind of tech? Oh, sorry. I'm asking if we've seen young people grow up in the last 20 years expecting to make their own presentations. I'm asking Andre if he thinks that young people are going to grow up expecting to be able to make their own games on the fly.
Well, my personal opinion is you put two kids together and they're not sitting in two opposite corners of a room. They're going to interact with each other. So you ask a child to do something, natural human tendency, I believe, is to do something interactive. So a PowerPoint presentation, while it may serve its purpose somewhere, I'd rather have an interactive presentation. If it's fun, awesome. Why can't calculus be fun? Why do I have to be preached to? Why does my 10-year-old has to be preached to by a teacher in a school instead of an interactive, engaging, fun environment? It doesn't say it doesn't have to be educational just because it's fun. There's lots of fun things, game-like environments that can be very educational. So I think, yes, a natural tendency as Bob was saying, is, yeah, of course, I make a movie, I make a game. If the tools are there and children can pick these up really easily, they will do so, and they will use whatever is available to them to, get much quicker to these results.
And let's talk about interactivity right now. Please, if you have any thoughts, anything you want to share, any questions, just chime in.
You mentioned that you don't think it's going to end. You mentioned that you don't think that movies are going to end with these new tools, but TV did change radio, and movies did change TV. How do you think movies and games now are going to be changing, and the people, I guess, developing them? Because TV is definitely different than it was before movies started coming out.
Well, I'll take a shot, I guess. I would argue that painting is different now than it was in the Renaissance. And again, I just got back from Greece and Italy, and I'm telling you, all due respect to all of my colleagues who make phenomenal interactive games and wonderful movies. You go look at the David, it's breathtaking. It stops you in your tracks. It makes you cry. It gets your attention. So that's my point, is that art form is still valid, and that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old. And that Renaissance art had a profound influence on what came after that, and then that influenced what came after that, and that influenced what came after that. You can see it today. The most popular summer blockbuster movie style right now is based on what? It's based on comic books. The Avengers, by the way, I've seen it 3 times, and I'd go tomorrow. I mean, it's a great movie, but that's based on a very old style, a very old art form, a very, very cartoony kind of, the screenplay for The Avengers is about 7 pages long. There's only 9 words in the whole movie. It's not like it's a work of literature, Why do we go 3 times? Because it's cool. We love the story. We want the good guy to win. We want the bad guy to lose. That goes all the way back to the cave paintings, and that will continue long, long after all of us are done. So the ability to deliver those kinds of stories well to an audience is always going to be what counts. And so there are still audiences in certain contexts that prefer radio. I like my news on the radio. I haven't watched television news in years, just because that's my preference. I prefer certain things over the internet. I prefer other things in my living room. I still like to go to the movies, and I love going to live theater for different reasons. So I'm just saying, I think this is an additive phenomenon. You didn't see people say, well, we learned how to sculpt, guess no more painting. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen just because it's technology-based here. I guess that wasn't the point I was trying to make.
You said additive phenomenon is exactly what I was going to say. Additive, at least. I think one of the things that we had discussed was that you asked how, in terms of film, TV, he just said interactive entertainment. That's the term I think will blanket everything. I don't think the lines will exist any longer. You won't necessarily be able to tell unless someone says, this is specifically a film. I'm making a film, and I'm setting my own boundaries. But we're going to have that choice, whether it's a game, whether it's electronic, whether you interact with it, whether it's sitting in your living room or in a room with a bunch of other people. You're going to have the choice. So I don't believe there are strict definitions any longer, at least in the very near future. There won't be.
So let me knock on one more thing, because it's sort of a soapbox. So the book that's partially behind Spielberg's Lincoln movie, which I don't know if you've seen the picture. It's a great movie. You should see it. But the book's even greater to me. And that book is an interactive experience. When you sit and read that book, it's so well written. Her voice is so incredibly powerful. Those stories are so relevant and told in a way, at least that I had never heard before. I have an interactive experience. I'm there. I can smell the wood in the fireplace, and I can imagine trying to read documents that are handwritten with quill pens by candlelight. I mean, you're really there. Great stories always have done that, and they'll continue to do it. All this new stuff does is let us get there a little quicker, a little different. And I think from a creative standpoint, it's a lot of fun. And maybe you can say some more about what you were talking about in terms of people being willing to get out and take the risk. One of the risks we have is that we now have the ability to kind of isolate ourselves and say, oh, well, I'm an internet guy and I only do that. Or if you look at social media, there's a real school of social science now that says, particularly Facebook is a good example, we've begun to hermetically seal ourselves off in groups of people that think the way we think. And that has a dampening effect. So I hope that what happens with the access to these tools that we're talking about, people will be more willing to get out of that and say, I'm going to go do this thing that I would have never normally done because there's a safe, easy way for me to do it. I'm an old folkie from the 60s. I'm going to a hip-hop concert. I'm a football guy. I'm going to a fine arts exhibition because digitally we can do that easier. I think, and you can say more of it because you were really there. But I think that's an opportunity that we have as audiences almost to take advantage of this.
I'm definitely liking what you're saying, and I can visualize that happening.
There are realities, though, as far as the responsibility to protect the data, and the younger the child, like on cyber protecting, learning about security and learning about what's proprietary and not. So my concern would be it's getting out there and then the lawyers are fighting it out. So my question would be, where's the balance? Because I love this phenomenon you're talking about, but I think it does need to be addressed from education awareness down to the youngest of when they create, is it theirs and how do they share and so on.
If I may, the first thing that comes to mind is how did we do this 100 years ago? When a child went to the library, took a book, copied what was in the book, went to the museum, copied a painting. The premise hasn't changed. That existed the moment we had printing, the moment we had books, we had movies, we had radio. It's always been there. Now it's a little bit more easier to get access to it. I don't have to leave the house. And we may be more litigious these days. So I asked the question, how did we solve it 100 years ago?
Let me sketch some of what I'm aware of and what many of you are in terms of what's already going on in terms of data and privacy. The profiling that's been done on almost everybody in this country and certainly many other countries is astounding. And when you have people who continually test behavioral profiling, it can get extremely accurate in terms of predicting behavior. And this is ever more true for younger and younger people because they're profiled too. People can control people, they can make money from people. There are a lot of reasons to do this. And when you have vast amounts of money behind the profiling or vast amounts of power behind the profiling, it's going to get done no matter what. And so it's being done. So I'm basically saying that we have more and more proliferation of cameras, higher resolution cameras, cameras that use facial recognition, cameras that know how you walk so that they can identify you because they know who you are just on how you walk. Well, the next phase is to predict sentiment. What are you feeling at the particular moment in a particular context? So advertisers right now, they're already delivering you content based on a specific time, place, context, other people around you. They're getting really, really good at this, and they get better all the time. And then it gets automated, so they're using artificial intelligence to drive these things instead of human eyeballs making decisions. So you can extrapolate that, and it's probably going to go out there. In terms of what Bob was talking about, with Google surprised me, or, well, that's great for some people, but other people, I think they're based on their psychological profiles, they're probably going to get more and more sequestered into a particular segment. And some other people are going to use this and they're going to expand their minds and expand their communities and do all kinds of wonderful things. So I think you have a separation going on right now. And I think that there's a lot of danger in that. And there's a tremendous amount of positive in that. And within the next year, all kinds of non-invasive medical monitoring is going to take place through your Apple TV at home because it's got stuff, monitors built into it and cameras built into it. So it sees what you're doing in your living room all the time. It knows exactly what you're watching. It taps into profiles. It knows exactly what you're using your credit cards on, where you go every day, what your behavior is every day. Most of us are very predictable, especially when we're in a segment of prediction. Extremely predictable. As an individual, fortunately, the butterfly effect still takes place, and it's much more costly and difficult to predict exactly what any individual is going to do. But that said, in terms of medical intervention, we have the ability now, very soon, to make ourselves healthier, because our own personal agents that are built into these things and built into our TVs at home, built into our smart houses, built into our smart workstations, they're going to remind us on how to be healthy. And I think that in terms of learning to tell our own story to ourselves, which is really what it's all about, I think that for some people it's going to be really phenomenal on how they master technology. And for many others, I think technology is going to be used to master them. So just riffing off of that idea, those are my thoughts about the near future in terms.
Just a real quick follow-up, being brief here. But as far as the education and awareness, that's phenomenal. But what body or
who's looking at the education and awareness to take all this wonderful technology, what's going on, and teaching the kids as young as possible down to elementary to use it responsibly?
So I think you raised three really fun and juicy points, which are some of my favorites. So let me take them real quick. One is what you just asked, which is where does media literacy fit in an age where we have all this fungible content all the time? Really great question. I don't know the answer. I would argue, though, that some effort toward media literacy is more important than it's ever been. To your point, when I went to the library, it was a fairly gated experience. There was a librarian, there were parents, there were teachers, you know. And by the way, the only books that got into the library were real books, you know. Now, if you go online, for instance, the Flat Earth Society website looks just as good as the Mayo Clinic's. The words are all spelled right, the graphics are nice, the titles are good, and one of them's complete garbage and the other one is relatively reasonable. So we do have a societal obligation to come up with the next version of what media literacy looks like. I don't have that answer. I will tell you I'm optimistic because, to the point we made earlier, kids particularly are self-selecting. They actually have developed a dialogue around the entire spectrum of media, just like we had around television, or just like I suppose the Greeks had around who was lecturing in the town square. I think that's one piece. The next piece you raised was rights management. You know, who owns it? Here's the truth about that. Not only are you not going to be able to copyright your work and protect it, you can't build lawyers and encryption fast enough. It's not going to happen. It's all going to be a fungible commodity, just like music has become today. Not only that, money is going to end. We're not going to have money anymore. We already have cultures where there's no money. The end of money is upon us. You're going to trade social capital, knowledge, network size, relationships. All those things are going to become more important than your bank account. In that universe, what's the model for how do you get a picture made? How do you get a game done? How do you build the next generation theme park? Don't know, but we already see that happening. So far from building bigger towers and hiring better snipers to protect my intellectual property, the new model is, how fast can I give this away free and figure out how to make my living around it somehow? That is really, truly the new model that we see coming out. You know, I think, let's see, what was the third one? We had well, then the issue of what can I know about you? You know, here's what's amazing. And we talked about this morning. People opt in. I find it phenomenally hilarious that you can go on Facebook and people will start railing about, I can't believe the Facebook did this. They're not getting away with this. Dude, Facebook is free. Nobody came to your house with a gun and said, you will now have a Facebook account or I'll kill you. You know, this is the mentality we have. We do not live, the age of privacy has been dead for a decade. We live in an age that's been called publicy. If you walk out your front door, you're consenting to have your image, your thoughts, your creative content, your DNA used. And that's the way it is already now. So that's only going to so we're going to have to adapt to that. I prefer the word community to publicy because I think there's a difference between a community and something that's public. Community is a little more interesting, and we are beginning to build some of these sort of hedged gardens around. I live in this community over here. We have a technology in our office down the street today that in 20 seconds can look at you, watch a TV monitor, tell me how old you are, where your eye gaze is, how long it's been there, and what you're thinking based on analyzing your facial musculature, right? That's one of 100. So the mythology that you can somehow protect your intellectual property or be private or somehow hide things so people can't see them, I would argue it's fallacious. I think we have to deal with the reality and move forward.
I have a question, though, that goes beyond that with rights management, intellectual property. I don't think it extends beyond that now, not just in the future. It's, do you even own your own emotions anymore?
You know,
That's what we're getting into.
Right.
Do you own your emotions? Do you have the right to that content and to keep it private?
Well, aren't there companies that are patenting our genes now? So maybe there's a company that owns your emotions and makes money with it. One point I wanted to quickly make to your first point in terms of how do we educate the children. Well, I would challenge the parents and the teachers out there, and I think it's already happening, that we are responsible for doing that. We can't wait for some organization that comes about or some policeman, oh, we need to do that and we need to educate them. No, it's us. We do that. We as parents, we as teachers have done so for hundreds of years, and we need to continue to do so. It's our responsibility. It's not somebody else's responsibility. It's our children. We need to do that. We can't lean off that responsibility to somebody else. That's my answer.
I think you're right. The most powerful digital media tool we have is the off switch. You know, that's the way we send our messages, and trust me, it works every time. You know, you don't like what's on television, stop watching it. It'll go away.
yeah, we can get into self-empowerment and giving up our own power at some point in the conversation, too.
The comments that were made about Michelangelo's David and the cave paintings raises an interesting point. Is this any better? Okay, so given that we can now currently read public records that are 10,000 years old, but in many cases can't read those that were created 20 years ago, does the obsolescence of the storage format mean that we might lose generations of cinema the same way that the flammability of silver nitrate causes us to lose a lot of the earlier cinema works?
I think that's going to come down to business models, and if somebody can figure out a way to make money from existing content, they'll probably save it for a while. And I think that if they can't, then you're going to have some segments that want to do it out of the goodness of their hearts or out of their own particular interest. But I think that's an excellent question. It's wide open. How much is going to be lost? Also, if you extrapolate what amount of data is being captured continually on most of us, certainly on our kids. We talked about this earlier. You know, you can kind of go back and look at your life, and there are some, in my case, I'm pretty old, right? So, I mean, there's not a whole lot left. I traveled, I was on the road a lot. There's just not a whole lot extant physical memories of my existence, but I certainly have my own story, which may not be very accurate. But our kids, there's going to be so much information that's stored on them from when they were conceived all the way up through. How does this change the story about yourself? There's not a whole lot of wiggle room for these kids. They've got a pretty strong, you know, history line. So that's something else we can talk about, and how is that going to change the future? And I know that there's some other questions, but one other thing to think about is when sentiment is measured continually. And so maybe a couple of years from now in one of the new Enzion theaters, thank goodness you guys are going to expand, maybe one of those theaters is able, non-invasively, without you even knowing it, to monitor your sentiment while you're watching a film. And Andre, just like games, maybe that film, and Bob, we talked about this, maybe the guys that created that film have created all kinds of middle parts and all kinds of endings and things like that. So based on this overall sentiment of the theater, you could see a different film tonight than you would see tomorrow night, or you would see in Des Moines or something like that. So those are some things that we can talk about, but go ahead and...
you know, if I could just respond to your question, though, I never thought about it before. It's intriguing. We're within a decade going to be at a picobyte per second. So the ability to store is almost unlimited. I think we could caveat that it's unlimited. The question becomes, and I don't have an answer, but the question your question raised me is, how do you decide what to keep? Because there's so much, and we have so much ability to create more. You know, the Greeks had to carve it on rocks, so it was kind of constrained. How do you decide what gets kept and stored and preserved and what doesn't? And that's going to be a really interesting sort process of, you know, is this important or not? And I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
It's a great question. I have a great example to that. This year we're making the 25th version of Madden, the video game. 25 years ago it came out the first time. I hazard to guess that anybody actually still has a game or has the ability to play the game on the technology it was originally published. It's a real issue. I don't know how do you solve that, because I don't know that I thought 25 years ago, oh, this is going to go on forever, and we need to save all this technology. I have videotapes at home. I don't even know how to turn them into DVDs. I don't have the technology anymore. It's like, okay, what do I do? Cassette tapes. Remember cassette tapes? I've got good music. Now I have to go out and buy CDs again, yet I've already bought them. It's great for business, not great for me as an individual necessarily. So it's an excellent question. I don't know what the answer is to that either.
One other gag on that we were talking about at breakfast, which is we have the ability now. I mean, you know, one of the things humans like to have a conceit about is that they will somehow last forever. We create a lot of stories and myths about that. So what happens when this goes away? You know, well, now, if you wanted to, you could pretty much create a persistent avatar of yourself. So it would just keep on going. I mean, it sounds a little gruesome, but I get messages from friends of mine on Facebook who are dead. Their Facebook account's not dead, just this part is. You know, that's where we live already. So, boy, you talk about persistence of records. What if you could sort of outlast the shell, you know, and you continued to have kind of a digital, you know, virtual life that went on? And is that virtual avatar of you, does it have legal responsibility? Can it commit a crime? Can it own property? Very interesting question that it's not a future thing, it's a now thing. We're really on the edge of defining that right now.
Or do you have to buy a software update in order to...
Yeah, absolutely. And what's that say about healthcare? You know?
This all ties into what I've been thinking since the beginning. You started off saying we want to tell stories, and I immediately thought, well, there's the statement that there's only 7 actual different stories in existence, and all of them are just a variation on that theme. And then that ties into, like you said, Madden has been going on for 25 years, and I'm thinking, you know, when I played Venture on the computer with a text interface, the experience in terms of enjoyment was not dramatically less than me playing World of Warcraft now, where I have a fully instantiated physics processor. And I'm kind of saying, so the challenge is, are we really just playing Pong with better graphics, or is innovation giving us something actually new? How do we do something different rather than just, now I got to go buy the White Album on a DVD instead of, you know, the cassette and the 8-track before that? And you know, how do we use this to actually do something different, or do we need to do something different?
Great question. We talked about the importance of immersion in our lives, kind of taking a few minutes, or maybe in the case of a film, a couple hours, and going somewhere else for a little while. And we talked about attention span, and if this digitization is changing young people's attention span, if they're going to still have the ability for deep, long-term immersion. So, great question. Is technology going to enable us to tell better stories, to tell different stories, to create other than 7 archetypes?
Well, I would say that we are delivering something new. We're in a free marketplace, and money still rules. The customer still rules with their wallets, and as long as they're buying World of Warcraft versus a text editor game, yeah, you're getting the new thing that you're asking for, that you're willing to pay for money. If something out there new isn't successful, people aren't going to buy it, the companies go bankrupt and they're out of business. We're not in the world where we live without money and just, you know, great new concepts evolve and emerge. Some of them do, some of them lack the marketing muscle behind them, or the publishing, whatever that may be, but the customer still votes with their money in all aspects, I think. So.
I don't believe new experiences, you know, turn your past ones into something suddenly illegitimate. You know, to his point, I mean, going to see David and having that as a work of art.
Is still selling.
Absolutely, and you have you still playing Atari games and emulation on your living room coffee table. It doesn't make it any different. It's an experience, something that you're going to enjoy, and you're going to look back upon. What we're selling and what people are consuming is purely experience. The storytelling is for the experience, regardless of how that occurs and the medium in which it occurs.
Yeah, we were talking at breakfast about the Homer to Homer phenomenon, you know. One of them was a guy who was a Greek who wrote about Odysseus, and that book still holds up really good. The other one's a guy who has an animated series that's on its umpty year on television, whose last name is Simpson. It doesn't matter. The reason, and they both work, you know. You go reread the Odyssey, it's still a great story. You still don't want the monsters to eat the sailors, you know. I mean, it's a great story. It's really great. And The Simpsons is pretty funny, and I think it's a kind of a false distinction, you know. We were talking about just 3D. If you think about 3D for a minute, I'll probably never own a 3D television set in my home, you know. I don't see the value add. That doesn't mean that going to see Avatar or Lion King, for instance, in 3D wasn't an enhanced experience that I really enjoyed. So I think it's the improv model. All of this stuff is always a yes and. It's always additive. It's always additive. Pac-Man's a blast. You know, if you can find one, it's still fun to play, particularly if you were any good at it. And, you know, and the new generation of Madden, although I can't figure out how it works, it's a really fun experience to have. Yeah, the answer is human beings historically have said, bring it. You know, in fact, I'd argue today, too, that the commoditization curve is so steep, we not only say bring it, we say, yeah, bring it. And by the way, that was yesterday at 2 o'clock. What do you got today? You know, our search for novelty drives all this. So I don't think we're ever going to wear any of it out. And I also don't think we're going to run out of our appetite for the new and the different, you know.
Look at Apple stock. People expected so much from Apple that when they didn't move really quickly, stock just dropped. We've had a question over here for quite some time, so let me get this.
It actually ties in with what Andre said. I'm an entertainment, and also for Bob. I'm an entertainment attorney, and Bob said something along the lines of you can't invent lawyers and digital protection fast enough. And then Andre was talking about voting with your money. One of the things I recently read about was DRM, the digital rights media system that EA implemented with Secure ROM, and that it's sort of upset a lot of your customers because it limits the amount of time that they can put it on various different computers. It also checks in every, I want to say like 5 to 10 days on whether or not the code is correct on their disk and that kind of thing, and that people are sort of voting with their money to say, we don't like this product. How is EA getting around that? How are they, do you know anything about how they're getting around that legally, or how they're trying to get around the fact that people are displeased with how that product has turned out?
So I don't know the details of that. It's completely not my area of expertise. I'm going to try to the best of my ability to answer the question. I think, like any other business, like the music business was affected, we're affected by the customers being upset, not buying the games, and we have to immediately react to that and figure out, okay, what do we do? Because if we don't have customers, we don't have money coming in, well, guess what? We're going to be out of business. We're not in business to be out of business. We want to stay in business, obviously. So we're going to try to work things out and, okay, what do we do? What is the right method? We also don't want people blatantly just stealing what's rightfully ours, where a lot of people spend a lot of hard work creating this. You know, some form of payment is due. And so how do you balance it? Again, I'm no expert in this. I don't deal with this at all and don't know the details on that. So I don't know if this satisfies your answer.
I mean, I'm going to take a little stab at it. I think what you're seeing right now is the growing pains of all these industries, like Bob said, starting with the music industry and moving into film and gaming, is you're seeing right now the sort of like the hardware implementation of DRM versus the software implementation, because it's more difficult for people to get around. That said, when the business models fail, like you said, people are voting with their pockets. I think you're going to see something driving more towards the social media model, which is you're getting a platform for free, so to speak. you're opting in, you're purchasing that, but then it's the service, it's everything that surrounds it. It's the experience that then you will be paying for. And I think it's just going to be a slow evolution into that. I don't know exactly how or why or how that relates to gaming and film specifically, but I really don't see a way around it because people have and always will hack things. I mean, every single market that's occurred. And it's only when restrictions happen, it only drives ingenuity, which I think is simultaneously beautiful and really scary.
It's how black markets are formed. You know, the hacker becomes the victor because the hacker's skill is more in demand than the product you're trying to steal. So and it's a belief. It's not supported by any fact, but my belief, just looking at it as an observer, is the models that are going to win are going to be, we have figured out a way and figured out a price point and figured out a delivery system that says if you'll just pay us this amount, it's easier for you to just buy it from us, the owner, than it is for you to go through what you'd have to go through to steal it. So why don't you just buy it? You know, and if you're in the intellectual property business, you probably have represented people. When we pitch television networks on shows, you know, you can't protect an idea. Anytime we pitch a network on a show, they can and often do steal it immediately. And there is no protection for that. So you either give up and stop, or you have to say, hey, that's just the risk of being out there, you know. What do we have to do to get the network to buy it from us? Well, it's the same thing I think we were talking about getting our consumers to do. We need to take them something that even though they could steal it, it's easier if they just buy it from us because we have created a proprietary relationship or we have the rights that they can't get or something. And I really think these models are going to sort out that way. I will tell you that building bigger fortresses and trying to prosecute more infringers is a dead end. You know, you guys will make a lot of money, but that won't change. It won't change the business at all. Because I promise you, I've become addicted to Homeland. So I've got the whole first season on some DVDs, which are double, triple, super secret, encrypted. You know, I think they blow up your car if you try to steal it. They turn your toaster off. They do all kinds of things. I promise you that I could go to Shanghai tomorrow and have as many copies of that made as I wanted and sell them on the street for about $10 a pop in about an hour and a half.
And the Supreme Court will back you on that now. Joe, I'll get to you in 1 second. Another thing is that in terms of marketing, internet marketing plans, you see crowdsourcing and you see community-based marketing. So in the music business, bands now, instead of having a middleman, they're going out and they're finding their own community wherever the community exists. The community could be strung together planetarily. And, you know, they get up to around 10,000 fans who are willing to spend $1, you know, every few days or for every song or something like that. And without any middleman, without as big an overhead as there used to be, they've got a sustainable methodology that'll get them to at least continue to be a band long enough to find venues, local venues that they can go to and support that, and then create products and create affiliates, partnerships, and they can kind of grow their own business in a sustainable way. So you see all these new emerging things, and I think crowdsourcing, you're going to see more and more and more crowdsourcing. But Joe, you've been waiting for a long time, so please.
Yeah, Joseph Rubel, Winter Park Maitland Observer. I saw something that I thought was pretty profoundly interesting the other evening on the evening news. And it was said that the United States government is now focusing on cyber matters or cyber warfare more so than they are terrorism. Can somebody react to that, please?
Absolutely. I think it's a great illustration of the fact that what's worth stuff now is information and what that information means. It's worth more than what's in the bank. We have done some work for the Air Force Research Labs Information Directorate, for instance, and their job is preventing that. And they're literally at the point where they're saying, not only are we going to have to prepare ourselves for massive cyber attack, which happened, by the way, every day. Every day the Pentagon gets hit. Every day the DIA gets hit. They said, we want to get to the point, which I thought was cool, of saying, we have enough computing power and data that we have now modeled this war. We're going to send you our files to demonstrate to you why you don't want to get into a shooting war with us, because it turns out you lose. And we pre-negotiate the war. So that's, I think as a peace person, that's a great idea. You know, so, but you're right on it. And that's the government side of it. The intellectual property espionage side of that is, I would bet, triple that. You know, I would bet they're trying to hack his computers as much or more than they're trying to hack the Pentagon's computers, because his stuff's actually worth more. You can make money doing that. So it is very real, you know. And there's been a whole industry grow up, and it's kind of I won't say a dark industry, but it's sort of a gray industry. You know, there are all kinds of companies, particularly in the technology hubs here and in the research park in Virginia and in Birmingham, Alabama, that have made a living out of building bigger and better, you know, very sophisticated ways of dealing with those kinds of assaults. So, yeah, and by the way, the same thing's going on in your house. As we're sitting here yakking, there are marketing firms out there trying to get into your computer to find out how to sell you some more stuff. And some of us will invite them in because they'll trade us something we value for it, and some of us won't. They'll get in there anyway, you know. I mean, we were laughing this morning. I'll tell this quick story. My mother-in-law is an interesting person, and how's that for an opening line? We were sitting once, and she said, "Hey, do you have your credit card with you?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can I borrow it? I want to book an airline ticket." I said, "No offense, Lois, but how about using your own credit card?" You know, she said, "Well, I'll pay it back." I said, "Well, I'm just curious." "Yeah, I have it, but why?" She said, "Well, I don't like to put my credit card online. I'm afraid people will steal my identity." I said, "So it's okay to put my credit card online?" You know, I said, "Lois, have you ever bought gas with your credit card?" She said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "Then they already have your identity." You know, and that's true. You know, again, back to this notion of publicity. If you've ever done that swipe thing, they know. You know, so forget trying to protect that. It's not protectable.
Down here. You know, there's another thing. In terms of your medical history and your genetic history, in terms of predicting your behavior and your wellness, your state of health, that's all coming down the pike really, really fast. So if agencies, if independent companies, if insurance companies, medical industry, pharmaceuticals know what you're likely to get and when you're likely to get it, how's that going to change things? You can do the same thing for the movie industry or storytelling too. You can extrapolate who's going to be most likely to enjoy a particular type of story. So I just wanted to say that while the microphone is coming to you.
So switching gears a little bit, I write and I teach storytelling, and I've been around some people recently who have said to me, you know, I don't have the patience to actually read a book or to actually watch an entire film. And this has come up many, many times. And, you know, I love, like everyone, TED Talks, 18 minutes, it works. You know, it's something that you can do as a little break, and, you know, between whatever. And so for me, I've been really thinking a lot and contemplating this notion of what do we have time for, tolerance for, and I have a 10-year-old, and you know, everything that she's exposed to, she can get to the juice of it within 3 seconds, like so much excitement. So this whole nature of like building towards something, or like scenes of preparation and scenes of aftermath, and all of the things that we have been taught to do in big novels, and you know, descriptive sentences and evocative, like I'm just wondering, you know, we have to get to it quickly to entertain our new audiences, you know, and then of course it leads to this interactive thing. Like it makes me think, well, then will there be this whole retro thing that happens where we'll have all this technology, and then we'll want to be with people in sort of an interactive place where we're getting stories that way, because we're so you know, disconnected from our world because of technology. So I think I asked a few questions in there, but
let me, if I may, start. The first one is a short attention span piece. I hear that a lot, and you know, games is one of the things, and video games that's blamed for that, and the internet and computers. And I would argue, sure, I can blame somebody else for my child having a short attention span, or for me having a short attention span, or I can take responsibility and say, you know what, it's me actually. I'm hungry for this. I want a quick fix. I want to teach my son, read a book or get a quick fix, don't read a book. There's nobody else to blame but us. I mean, in my opinion. And so I think it's artificial that we assume, yes, there's lots of information there, lots of quick fixes that we can seek out, but people still go to the movies. I mean, they said through Hobbit, that was not a short movie. That was not a short attention span movie. I mean, I think it was pretty successful. My 10-year-old sat through it and loved it. You know, yes, he also likes to watch a YouTube video. So it's really down to how do I deal with that responsibly? You know, we need to take responsibility. I see more and more in today's society where we try to absolve ourselves of that responsibility and say, well, this is the fault, or that's the fault. Or, no, it's me. You know, I'm at fault if my attention span is short. I'm at fault as a parent if my kids are not behaving well. I think that's my personal opinion. So.
Agreed. Accountability and responsibility is something, an entitlement that's a rampant issue these days. In terms of attention span, the greatest rate of content consumption on the face of the planet is photography. There's a reason why social media outlets are investing heavily in just visual content delivery. That's it. You've watched the format of Facebook change dramatically over the last few months to focus purely on imagery. Why? Because you can get a lot of different stories told in a single image just scrolling across your screen. And that's what people want. They want to consume as much as they can of their friends and their family and the people that they're interested in through a single image. So it's really, really interesting to me that we've not come full circle, but in a sense we have in this, like, traditional art, painting. It's a singular image. It sits on the wall. It's there. Now we've gone all the way to film, 3D, and still, what do we go back to? A singular image.
I would come at it this way. I think it's a fascinating topic. I'll bet it's always been the case. You know, I'm sure that on a dark winter night, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, Norwegian parents sat around and said, I'm just worried about Olaf. He just won't sit through the 24-hour ring cycle anymore. I just don't know. He'll only give me 6 or 7 hours at a time. What are we going to do about this society? Here's the way we think about it as storytellers. And I think you can put some science around this. Our model is, we call it the experience reactor, but there are 3 pieces. The piece you can't control at all is the audience. That person comes with who they are. They come with their cultural background, their language, their mental model, their DNA. You can know who they are, and the better storytellers do. If you've ever made a living as a musician, you don't play your light jazz set for the truck driver convention. It's a bad idea, unless you want to wear beer home. So you can know who your audience is, but you can't do anything about it. You can influence what your audience expects from the story a little bit. You can prime them a little bit. We call that marketing. So I say, hey, fabulous new blockbuster. It has 9 explosions, it's got pretty girls, or deeply emotional, or sci-fi, or we can influence. That's a blunt instrument, but you can begin to say, hey, I'm going to move this kind of circle and kind of know who you are and overlap you with it. The last piece is context and delivery. And as storytellers, we have infinite control over that. And so what we have to do is take, again, back to your point, we have to take the responsibility as the teller, or whether you're a teacher or a marketer or an entertainer, it doesn't matter. As the storyteller, say, all right, I know who this is. I've begun to bias them a bit to anticipate. Now I have to provide the story particles. I have to provide the voice and the details and the emotion and the plot and the conflict and resolution and all those things in a way that I live up to the challenge I've created for myself to fulfill what I've said I'm going to do. We find time and time again, media independent. I don't care whether it's Mark Twain, in a book, or it's the most sophisticated 3D, whatever you can think of. If I do that as a storyteller, the willing suspension of disbelief will occur, and when that happens, time goes away. Time goes away. If you're in the middle of a great story, and I happen to be a Hobbit freak, so to me the movie wasn't nearly long enough, but I didn't look at my watch in that movie. I didn't look at my watch in Avatar. I'm in the story. And it's the same thing. When you wake up, if you're a reader and you've had this experience, you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're in 2 o'clock in the morning going, oh God, I got to go to sleep. I got to work tomorrow. Maybe one more chapter. That phenomenon that happens is because a storyteller has taken responsibility to do that. So I'm on the side of arguing. I think it's platform independent. I don't think it's because of games or TV or anything else. I think it's failure to attend to our duties as good storytellers to really do our homework and do it right.
Okay, so I just want to So the question, not at all. So I agree with you. Like I'm not at all any sort of shifting responsibility onto to people making the different things that they're making. My point is that I am seeing what I am really seeing in all of my students. My 20-year. And I'm not talking about my daughter can read very long books. I am a reader. All of this. I'm seeing many people telling me they don't have the patience for movies, even engaging ones or books, because, and not blaming anything else, but to me, I think that that's a really interesting thing as far as the content that we will be creating. I think it's going to be changing. And that's kind of what I'm curious to hear if you guys are seeing that, because I think what I'm hearing back is no, you think people do and they will continue to watch really long things and read really long books. Yeah. That's what I'm hearing back.
I totally believe that. Watch my son, who also happens to be 10 years old. For years tried to get him to read books. Wouldn't go near it. Had to force him. And now he sits there and in half a day digests 39 clues. And he goes on, and the next one. Oh, can't get the next one. Hunger Games. Hugely popular book. Made into a movie, a whole series. So sure, there is some of that, the impatience. Would we all love to have the quick fix? Absolutely. But ultimately, I think it is going to be going back, because those things aren't going out of fashion. The long movies aren't dying out. The books aren't dying out. We're not seeing it in the business world. If we were seeing in the business world, books don't sell anymore, or 1.5 hour movies, the theaters are empty, then maybe, yes, I would agree. But I think it's purely a perception that's not based on reality or the data that's available to me.
Now, there's a flip side. There's a flip side. The flip side is you've described a market opportunity that says there is an audience for short form. Great, let's make short form stories. Now, that's the lovely thing about the internet. We don't have to think in television anymore about, okay, we're going to make 13 22-minute half-hour episodes. We can make 9 4.5-minute episodes. We can, that's great. And if you're saying there may be an emergent audience that says there are times when I only want to pay attention for 4 minutes, you can't shut storytellers up. We will make 4-minute stories. That'll happen. But I don't think it's either or.
But don't you think that the increase in serialized television is maybe a response to that type of phenomenon she's mentioning, where I don't want to sit through a 3-hour movie, but I can take a much longer form story an hour at a time?
Well, yeah, but that's not new. I mean, we've had serialized television ever since there's been television. I mean, that's one of the advantages, the early advantages of television was you could do it in your house. I would say what's changed now is you can do it in your house and you can do it when you want, because nobody does time and channel. It's all forward in store. So, yeah, I've got my series. I like Bones. I can watch 4 or 5 episodes of Bones and catch up whenever I want to. And yeah, it does. The serialization works, but it doesn't mean I won't go to a movie, and it doesn't mean I won't read an 800-page novel. They're different choices.
It's just options. I mean, that's all we're doing. It still, once again, goes back to everything being an additive system. It's content delivery. I don't think there's anything really new or different about that.
And if you look at Netflix, recently they came out with the first series, all published on the first day. I don't know how many episodes it was, hugely successful. I mean, if I'm interested in a series, I'd rather actually watch the whole thing, 13 episodes in a day, than wait 13 weeks or 13 months and, okay, 1 episode at a time. Yes, I will take 13 hours and watch it. I've done it with some, television shows. Sorry? Yeah, there you go. I started out Lost with the 3rd season, watching the first 2 seasons back to back to actually get caught up. So I think it's all additive and it's options. What options are available? And you may not be in the mood. I mean, we're highly complex people. One day you feel like I just want a 4-minute story. I want something quick and I'm entertained. I'm in a rush. And another day you feel like, you know what? I'm gonna watch a 13-hour-long movie. I mean, there are movies that are 13-hour longs. So.
I wanted to follow up because it's a really good question as far as, I call it time management. You only have so much time in a day, so what do you see and what do you comprehend? I was watching the other day, Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes was interviewing the Google founders, Bill Gates and Zuckerberg, and when she went to the Google people talking about, we know everything about you, she goes, show me what you know about 60 Minutes. And Leslie Stahl goes, oh my gosh, that's all controversy, negative. Where's the happy, positive stuff? And so, they say that on sentiment and what people are seeing in our society is a lot of the negativity. It takes, for one negative, it takes about 3 positives to get people thinking there. So it just seems like it's a time management and what you can digest and having more control. It's kind of a yin and yang between who's controlling you and how much control you have in time management. It's a comment, but my question would be the negative and the consequence, like you see what's happening in the colleges and schools compared to the positive.
Well, as an educator, going back to the questions of the students that we're seeing, and I'm sure that there are no elementary school teachers in here because they're working right now, but certainly a segment of our students have major time management issues that go beyond ADHD and autism and the other things that are being measured more accurately now probably than they were in the past. So, yeah, we have an obligation to deal with people who are no longer empowered or they don't have the capabilities to begin with to do sustained focus. And it's a challenge. So as storytellers, for them, we have to come up with bits and pieces that they can string together to make sense and learn something. One of the boards I'm on is the Florida Alliance for Arts Education. And we have all these efficacy studies showing that if you integrate the arts with science, with STEM, that it makes all kinds of positive things happen, going back to something positive. So you get the story in there, the art, the story, the picture, the movie, the sound, and everything else, and it starts to make sense of math and science, technology, and engineering. So if we can integrate these things, we can probably win. In terms of sentiment marketing, yes, a lot of what's being published is a lot of negative sentiment in terms of measuring that. But when you find positive sentiment, you find something that really motivates somebody, you can sell them something. So they're probably a lot less likely to disclose to 60 Minutes what they found out that was positive about 60 Minutes. So
I always love it when people talk about time management. I think it's the same thing as talking about gravity management. It's silly. First of all, time is made up. Physicists proved it years ago. Time is made up. It's all made up. We made the whole thing up just so we'd have a way of talking about it and framing it. The truth is you have all the time there is because that's what we always all have, right? It's not time management. It's attention management. It's where do you put it's mind management. Where do you put your mind? And that's really the issue. And we're sort of in charge of that. So, it's a choice you make. What I think people mean when they talk about this attention issue or time management or any of those things. And by the way, I don't discount your point. We find it, particularly in branding and marketing, there's a worldwide ubiquitous sense of time poverty everywhere in every culture at every level. It's an amazing, it's kind of a pandemic in the world. Nobody thinks they have any time, So why is that? Well, it's because the throughput rate is so much higher. One of the things about living in the digital age is we live on the end of a very fat pipe that's spewing all the time at us, and so we got more coming at us. When all you used to have to do is sort of sit quietly and listen to see if you heard any drums or saw any smoke rising to find out there was information, that was different than being the other end of this digital fire hose we're all on the other end on. So it's frankly a lack of training. We haven't quite figured out as a species yet how to parse our mental model to deal with the amount of information we have. Some people seem to deal with it better than others, and dealing with it doesn't always mean I take it all in. Some of the smartest and frankly happiest people I know are the people who said, no, I'm online 45 minutes a day and then I turn it off and that's it. I don't, so I think that's really what it is when we talk about this. There's way more than anybody can process now. Where do you put your attention? Now, as entertainers, as teachers, as marketers, because I claim those 3 people are really one person. They're just doing it in different flavors. the answer is, well, I put my attention on whoever seems to have the best story, you know, because one of the things about great stories is they tend to slow time down. They take you out of time, you know, and so do things like meditation and contemplation. But, you know, that's where we put our attention. So I'll go back to where we started. If you want somebody's attention, give them a reason to pay attention, then time won't matter. They'll give you that amount of mindscape that you want. But the clock's pretty much got 24 hours on it, just like it always has.
Yep, and I would argue exactly the same, because as you were talking and asking a question, I was thinking back to my school days, when computers weren't around, calculators weren't even introduced yet. And it's like, what did I do in class? Well, guess what? I didn't pay attention because I didn't like being preached to. I was one of these kids that suffers from attention disorder, whatever we call it today. And, you know, I'm sitting in plenty of meetings these days where I don't pay attention either because I'm just bored. Yes, I'm not interested. You know, I have to be here. I have to be in school. I have to be somewhere. Somebody makes me do something. Okay, fine. I'll do it. But it's not necessarily interesting. I don't think it has changed. What's changed is what we do during that time. I used to exchange notes. I used to get the class, you know, wound up. You know, let's have some fun here instead of doing math. Yeah, today they text or cruise the internet. I think it's just a different means of how we waste the time or spend the time, you know, depending on your perspective.
Speaking of time, we have time for one more question. Get the microphone to you momentarily.
And thank you for your great questions, too.
If I may, it's more of a comment. I think the digital providers are in the great position. I'm old enough to where when I started out, creativity in the arts was kind of a fluff thing that was really not important. I was an engineer and all that was kind of uninteresting. And the job of computers at that time was to simplify our lives as much as we possibly could, to take all of the things that were difficult to do and make them easier. And it recently occurred to me that at this point, the job of technology and computers is to complicate our lives in interesting ways. And precisely the business that you guys are in, as you're pointing out, if you do that properly, it educates, it moves society forward, and it has become the important thrust of society. It is even the technological way for us to advance. So kind of come 180 degrees from being the fluff that was how we waste time to this is the industry that is leading us.
Excellent observation. The philosopher George Gurdjieff would be very pleased with that. We really do. It gives us an opportunity to master, and we do need to master time. And let me just put a plug in for Enzion. One thing that digitization can't really do really well in terms of virtualization is give people the same opportunity to be together physically and to share all the experience that we share and all the subliminal experience that we can only share when we're together physically. And it's one of the wonderful things about independent film and Enzion is that it gives us this venue that we can all come together and share our ideas. The main thing that we came away from breakfast was, let's learn together. Let's find out what you guys know, your comments, your questions, what you want to share with us. And you gave us the opportunity to do that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.